Yeah.
Okay.
Jenifer, Blair, welcome to our interview series this morning. It's nice to have you with us. I'm particularly interested in talking with you because I know that you're one of our Potomac and Chesapeake members who have been on both sides of the desk where the school to college transition is involved. Tell us a little bit about where and when you got started down this road.
Sure. I went to Mary Washington College as an undergraduate, was very involved in a lot of student activities, and was a tour guide. And an opportunity arose for me to apply for a job as an admissions counselor. This was back in the spring of 1982. And I was offered the job. It was a 4-month job without any benefits. It ended in December, basically a roadrunner position. And I accepted that and had a chance to travel all over the Mid-Atlantic. I loved it, but the job ended, and I went home to Baltimore. Was called back to do some research with the alumni office in the spring of '83, and literally on a Friday afternoon, I was ready to leave Mary Washington, go back to Baltimore. I've been offered a job at a university in Baltimore in admissions, and I got a call from Conrad Warlick, who was the dean of admissions at the time, and he said, "JV, so-and-so has just resigned, and I have a full-time position as an assistant dean of admissions. Would you accept the job?" And I said yes, and I called the University of Baltimore and said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there on Tuesday to start the job."
Oh.
I felt guilty for a long time about that, but it was a great decision and sort of really changed the trajectory of my career. So I was at Mary Washington for a long time. And
that's where you and I first met.
Exactly, yeah. I was there for 21 years, and I've told people I went from tour guide to dean in 17 years, and along the way with my master's and doctorate, and then about 10 years ago, in 2003, an advancement opportunity came up for me to move from Mary Washington to another university in Baltimore and be closer to my family. So that's when I came back to Baltimore and worked in higher ed for a while, and then made the move in 2008 to the high school side.
And you've been at Boys Latin since then?
Yes, I've been at BL for 5 years, and really I'd gone from admissions to enrollment management. I was in the chief enrollment management officer at 2 universities in Baltimore. I enjoyed that, but at the second one, I really felt like I missed working with students. And really after several years earlier, I talked with Joan Mudge, who's at Garrison Forest, about what it was like to be on the high school side, and she had given me some advice and talked with me about what that opportunity might be like. And sure enough, in the spring of 2008, Boys Latin had a position open for a director. It's a mile from my home. And I had known about BL my whole life, having grown up in Baltimore, and I thought, I'll throw my hat in the ring and see. And I was very fortunate. Within a month of applying, I was offered the job. I started June 1st, and my head of school was new. He had interviewed me, but he came on board a month after I did, so we arrived at the same time. And he's been very supportive and allowed me to continue to be involved in PCACAC. And to be honest, I found that my higher ed background, involvement in professional associations gave me really instant credibility with my parents and students at BL, which was great. I still had to learn a lot about the school and working in an independent school setting, but having had that experience in higher ed made the transition easier. And I think I had some credibility from the outset, having known what it was like to work on the higher ed side.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite story about someone who has mentored you along the way, a little anecdotal piece of advice that you got somewhere along the way that has stuck with you all this time? Most of us have had experiences like that we like to trade back and forth.
Well, there's, I think about how I first got involved in PCACAC. I was very fortunate. Early in my career, actually in the spring of '84, was the first conference I attended, the infamous ice rink in Ocean City, Maryland. And I remember meeting people like Sally Scott and Charlotte Wilder, Pam Spence, who was the associate dean at the University of Richmond, but just meeting some wonderful people. And just everybody was just so welcoming, and I was brand new to the profession, meeting a lot of people for the first time. And Conrad Warlick, who I mentioned he had hired me, actually sort of pushed me to get more involved, and he volunteered me to be the editor for our newsletter a few years later. And I think Audrey Hill may have been the president or president-elect that year. And I'm really glad he volunteered me, because that really started me on many years of having different opportunities with the executive board, different leadership opportunities, and I enjoyed it. This is when everything was on paper and I had to go to the printer, and he worked with the typesetter who set it all up and would proof it. So sort of the old days, long before the internet and electronic publications. So Conrad Warlick, I owe him a great deal as a wonderful mentor. He's also past president of PCACAC, but he...
As you are.
Well, I am. I was president in 97, 98, but Conrad encouraged me to get involved. He also was very supportive when I wanted to go back to graduate school, because I worked on my master's while I was working, and to work around a travel schedule that allowed me to take classes. He was very supportive of that, and I'm very appreciative. And some years later, when Conrad moved on to another position at Mary Washington as the executive vice president, Marty Wilder, who's also past president, who I've been working with, became the VP, and he supported me when I decided to go back to grad school again and earn my doctorate. So I was able to take a sabbatical for a year and finish my coursework, and then write my dissertation while I was back at work. And ironically, the year I was president-elect, so the year I was planning the conference, which was held at the Sheraton in Towson, my year of president-elect, we were in Charlottesville. That was the same time I was writing my dissertation, and I literally defended my dissertation about 6 weeks after the PCACAC conference. So I had a lot going on in the spring of 97 between some travel overseas with my parents, finishing up my comps, writing my dissertation, presenting my dissertation research. And so again, I really appreciate Marty Wilder being so supportive and allowing me to take some time off to go to classes that sometimes were in the middle of the day, because this is before online classes in the early to mid 90s, and I literally had to trek to Charlottesville, a couple times a week, and physically be in class to do the program. So I feel very fortunate to have had two wonderful friends and mentors that allowed me to be involved, but also to get the credentialing. That has been very important to me.
Some of your leadership roles in Potomac and Chesapeake carried you on to involvements with the National Association as well. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I worked with I was on the editorial board for the Journal of College Admissions for several years, and my last year was editor, and that was in early 2000s, actually about 2000 to 2002 or so, and that was great to work with other people from around the country and to meet in, at that time, Arlington, when NACAC was there, and or Alexandria actually, and work on articles and encourage people to write and submit those, and we'd review them in advance before they were published, so that was great. Several years ago, I was invited to run for the board of directors. That was a great experience, and even though I wasn't elected, I feel honored to have been asked. That was the election for those positions was the year that NACAC was in Baltimore, so it was really nice to be in my hometown for that. So those have been two opportunities that I've had, and then certainly having been through the presidential cycle, as you know, Dale, you get to meet your counterparts from around the country at LDI, and our group, we were present at the time when the internet was just emerging, so unlike some of the more recent groups that have listservs and groups, we didn't quite connect that way, but we still see one another at the national meeting and catch up, but it was a neat group of people to get to know.
I remember those 2 years in state and regional president's council at national level with lots of great memories, and like you, I still see a lot of those people from time to time.
Sort of our counterparts, and it's neat to see what they're still doing, if they're at the same institution, if they've moved around, and so I usually catch up with them at NACAC,
Do you see any huge challenges that are facing our profession in the next 5 to 10 years? What would you say along those lines?
I mean, I think a number of those issues came up in the Cracker Barrel that we had yesterday at the conference we're having this year in Norfolk. I think colleges and universities are becoming, the stress is on chief enrollment officers to bring in a class, and especially for private institutions to bring in the revenue to match that. And so I'm worried at times about students who cannot pay the full freight of tuition, fees, room and board, and need some financial assistance, and how are they going to get that? The amount of money that public institutions are getting continues to decrease. I know when I was actually at Mary Washington this weekend before coming here, I'm on the alumni board and met with our rector, saw her, and she mentioned fewer than 20% of the funding is coming from the state now, and that's a huge change from back in the 80s when I first started, when more than 70% of the funding came from the state. So I think I think it's a much more difficult time to be in admissions now than when I started 30 years ago. I think there are a lot more challenges to bring in a class and how to predict the behavior of 17, 18-year-olds, how to diversify your revenue stream beyond just tuition. So I think it's challenging. At the same time, I really want to help our families understand how does financial aid work, how to communicate best, how to, the importance of making some family decisions that help support their children going on to the college that's a good fit for them. Looking at both public and private schools, not eliminating private schools because a sticker price is too high because there's aid there, but also, taking a look at options in the public schools. So it goes back to some of the things we hear at NACAC about access, about affordability. But I think being a dean of admission now or VP for enrollment is a lot tougher than 10 or 20 years ago.
Jenifer, Blair, thanks so much for visiting with us for a little while this morning.
Thank you, Dal. It was a pleasure. Thank you.